subscribe.
What I want to talk to you about is aging, and I want to introduce this discussion with a internet presentation by National Geographic. This man right here, he's out of the National Geographic article that is goes along with this presentation that I just showed you. You see him at 100 years old holding on to a ski rope. Well, I just want you to imagine a guy holding on to a windsurfer boom at 100 years old. And that's the picture that I want you to have of me, because, you know, that is my goal, to live as long and as healthy as possible. I know it's your goal too. The longest lived person that we know about is this French lady. She lived to be 122 years old. There are lots of people who have claims about longevity, but this is documented. And it's estimated that the longest a person can live would be 125 years. In the world today, there are about 50 people who are 110 years and older. And of people who live 100 years or older, centenarians, there are about 80,000 of them. Now, the important thing to understand when they interviewed these people is what they discovered is that these successful livers did not see doctors. Virtually none of them until they were 90 years old. So don't expect to be saved by the medical business. Remember, sick people take drugs. Sick people go for operations. Healthy people don't deal with the medical industry. And people who live a long time, likewise, don't deal with the medical industry. They have no need to. Now, this lifespan that we have has been known for a long time. In the Bible, they talk about 70 years are given us, and some may even live to be 80, and that's writings of 3,000 years ago. And you can even get a glimpse of that very maximum lifespan if you read Genesis, as it says, I will give him 120 years to mend his ways. So the average lifespan, well, excuse me, not the average lifespan, but the lifespan that can be attained and the maximum lifespan have been known for thousands of years. It's just the number of people who attain this goal of living to be in their 80s, 90s, and maybe 100 or even more has increased. And the reason it's increased is for several factors. There's some milestones here. One of the milestones is that when people lived in very early times, prehistoric times, they were involved in many battles. They were involved with lots of accidents and no medical care. They had terrible problems with infection, so their longevity was quite short. They talk about the hunter-gatherers living on average, say, 25 years. One of the big changes was when people became civilized and started to organize themselves so they could protect themselves against enemies. And then what happened next that really made a big difference is we started to conquer infectious diseases. And conquering of infectious diseases involved things like antibiotics, immunizations, and proper sanitation, which occurred 100, 200 years ago. And we made a big improvement in the average lifespan, the number of people who were able to attain a longer life and a successful life. And in 1900, the average lifespan was about 47 years. Today, with all the modern improvements we have with the antibiotics, immunization, sanitation, and so on, we have increased that lifespan to around 77 years of age. So where do we go from here? We've taken care of battles primarily, at least for the average population. We've taken care of accidents. We've got great hospitals to deal with the accident problems that we have. And we're highly successful when it comes to bacterial and parasite infections. The next increase in longevity to get past that 77 years average has to do with what we're all about, and that's to deal with the chronic diseases. That's to deal with problems of fat and cholesterol infiltrating your arteries, and inflammatory reactions that take place throughout your body as a consequence of what you eat, like inflammation of the heart and the kidneys and the liver and so on, that shorten your life. It has to do with dealing with environmental chemicals that cause your cells to mutate and to turn into cancers. And it has to do with wear and tear from the diet that we eat, this excessively rich diet, which is high in protein, which wears out the kidneys, wears out the liver. The next step is dealing with chronic diseases. And that's where we'll get that boost in longevity to live successfully past 77 years. Just to review the average lifespan, prehistoric was around 25 years. In classic Greece and classic Rome, it was around 28 years. Medieval England, about 29. The United States in 1800, 37 years was the average lifespan. Around 1900 it was 47 years, and about that time we got involved with the antibiotics, sanitation, immunizations. In 1950, which I can remember, the average lifespan was 68 years. In the USA today it's around 77 years. But if we look at people who have greater longevity due to the fact that they take better care of themselves, they eat better, they exercise. We're looking at people in Japan who in 2002 had an average lifespan of 82 years. If we look at all the Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists, we see an average lifespan of 85 years. And if we look at the vegetarian Adventist, their average lifespan is 87 years, which is 10 years longer than the average person who lives in California. And of course, you know that the Seventh-day Adventists are known for their healthy diets and lifestyle, particularly vegetarian diets. Any of you who don't know this fact, I want you to know I am not an Adventist. I know very little about their religious teachings, but I've been sort of an honorary Adventist all these years because I've worked closely with this population of people, and I also believe and support their dietary and lifestyle changes. So you're looking for the Fountain of Youth. I'll tell you where it is. It's in St. Augustine, Florida. And you go visit it anytime you want. Of course you know that's a myth. Well, there are other myths in your community too. For example, there are in this country about 3,000 doctors who practice anti-aging medicine. And it's a big business. It's a $30 billion a year business, and they offer you pills and potions and false promises. This is not the way to get longevity. In these clinics, they sell things like human growth hormone, testosterone, estrogens, DHEA, and vitamin supplements, and so on. And you'll waste a lot of money believing in these people and buying their goods, but likely they'll do you more harm than good. So let's get back to this National Geographic article and the presentation. The issue was November 2005, and the front cover says, Secrets of Living Longer. And they talked about the people in Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, and Loma Linda, California. And as you read through this issue, you'll get to the end of the magazine, and what you'll find is a summary page. And the summary page tells you what to do. After all of the information they gave you, they kind of boil it down. Well, what do you do? Well, after the title, Do It Yourself, the biggest words there are Go Vegetarian. That's the conclusion of the people who researched this article, is go vegetarian. And then they talked about some classic vegetarians. They talked about Henry Ford, who was a soy advocate. They talked about Benjamin Franklin, who was cheap and wanted to save money. And they talked about Leonardo da Vinci, who was a moral vegetarian. There are lots of ways that people get to this healthier diet. And I think all of these points of view are very important. You don't want to waste your money. You want to be kind to the environment. You want to be kind to animals. And you also want to be kind to yourself and your family. So regardless of what your particular emphasis is, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. All of these are issues of great value. Helen White is the founder of the Adventist Church. Helen White wrote a book in 1938 called Counsels on Diet and Foods, and she instructed her congregation to eat a healthy diet. And this all came about because Ellen White's husband was sick. And he got help from the natural hygienists, which were a group of health advocates in those times who recommended a vegetarian diet. And she was so pleased with the results that occurred with her husband is she wanted to share this message with the rest of her church. And so it became one of the founding principles of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now the statistics are, as Seventh-day Adventists, about half of them still eat meat. They're far from ideal in their dietary practices. And of the half that don't eat meat, about 30–40% of them, they eat quite a bit of dairy products. And of those who are vegan, in other words, avoid all animal products, they're still very high in their diet in soy products and oils. So even with the Seventh-day Adventist vegetarians living 10 years longer on average than the average person in California, there's still room for improvement in their diet by decreasing the oil intake, by decreasing the soy product intake, increasing the overall quality of the diet. The fountain of youth is this. It's a diet that's based on plant foods. And that diet that's based on plant foods has all kinds of qualities to it that we know increase longevity. And I want to summarize for you what those qualities are, and then we'll go and discuss them in some detail. A healthy diet restricts calories. It restricts fat, it restricts protein, it lowers insulin-like growth factor 1 level. Insulin-like growth factor 1 accelerates growth. Well, you don't want to grow any faster, do you? Of course not. So you want to do everything you can to keep growth factors low. So you grow slowly, you age slowly. A healthy diet, a diet based on plant foods, has lots of antioxidants and lots of phytochemicals in it. That's the fountain of youth. Of course, that fountain of youth costs nothing. Once you learn it, nobody can sell it to you again. And it's kind to every other aspect of our life, to animals, to the environment, to religious principles. You all know Benjamin Rush. He was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was a very famous physician and historian. Benjamin Rush wrote about people almost 300 years ago, a message that applies today. Benjamin Rush was talking about the Native Americans, and he says, in them, the old proverb may well be verified. Natura paucis contenta. Nature is satisfied with little. For though this be their daily portion, they are still healthy and lusty. They grow so proportionably and continue so long in their vigor, most of them being 50 before a wrinkled brow or gray hair betray their age. Now, this is the Native American population living largely on a plant food-based diet, very little rich foods. Now, he also talked about his contemporaries, the people he lived with. He said, the diet of inhabitants of Philadelphia during those years consisted chiefly of animal food. It was eaten in some families 3 times, and in all twice a day. Death was common between the 50th and 60th years of life from gout, strokes, liver failure, and kidney failure. So the understanding of longevity and good health goes back hundreds and thousands of years. Benjamin Rush, he understood that those who ate all that rich food, they aged quickly and they died quickly. Those who were on a more basic plant food-based diet like the Native Americans, they had a long, productive life and they were trim and active. And so this is not a new message. Unfortunately, it's one that has to be retold over and over again. The idea of changing your diet to live longer dates back to 1550. This is the first official writings about taking an active approach so that you would live longer. Luigi Canaro was a nobleman, and so he was eating all that rich food, and he was getting fat and sick, and he decided that he didn't want to live a short life like his contemporaries, the other noblemen, the other kings and queens. And so he decided to change his diet by restricting his food. And that meant he ate a lot less meat, and he ate a lot fewer calories. And as a consequence of what he did, he ended up living to be 100. And people who are interested in food changes in order to live longer, they consider this man the father of the movement. Now, we've been doing animal experiments for decades. And I just want to summarize what these experiments show. Is that if you take animals and you reduce their food intake, their calorie intake, by 30 to 60% consistently, in all different species of animals, consistently, they live about 50% longer. The first experiment that really demonstrated this to us in human beings was just published in 2006. The investigators looked at a group of people who were interested in longevity and prolonging their life based upon a healthier diet. And so there's an organization of folks who do this. They restrict food, eat healthier diet, we eat more plant foods, and as a consequence, they become trimmer and healthier. And they wanted to consider what this effect would be on their aging process. And the way they determined this is they looked at their hearts. And the heart, as it gets older, it becomes fibrous and less strong due to inflammation caused by the diet. And so what they did is they examined the ability of the heart to pump blood. And they did this by a sound test. It's called an echocardiogram, where they looked at the heart and they saw how much blood flowed through the mitral valve. And what you see in these graphs are you see representations of the flow of blood through the mitral valve, which is a reflection of how strong the heart can beat. In other words, how much healthy muscle tissue there is. And it reflects aging. And so they looked at the flow of blood through the mitral valve in young, healthy people, and they found a good flow of blood through the mitral valve, very strong flow. And then they looked at older people, and they noticed the blood flow through the mitral valve was much decreased, which represented a weakness of the heart due to that chronic inflammation from the diet. And then they looked at these people who were interested in anti-aging through healthier foods, through plant-based foods, through eating less, through not being as much of a glutton. And they looked at these people and they looked at the flow of blood through their mitral valve, and they saw a much better flow of blood, in other words, representing a much stronger heart muscle in people of the same age as the average American. And the important thing to notice about these people with the better flow of blood at a comparable age is that these people were only on a healthier diet for 6 years on average. In other words, they were like us. They abused themselves. They followed the wrong rules for many years until they got wisdom. And the conclusion of the researchers of this study is that those people who ate a healthier diet had hearts that looked 15 years younger than the average American. Now that's impressive. That is a very hopeful message as far as I'm concerned, and it should be to you also. Now, one of the things that these authors pointed out is that you can't get these kind of benefits just by eating less garbage. It doesn't work. People who attain this improvement in health, this improvement in their youth, these people, they change the components of the diet, not just the amount of bad food they eat. And they also pointed out in their research paper is even if you exercise and that causes you to lose weight, that's not going to give you the longevity that changing the components of the diet would. All right, so you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, I've got to eat less food to live longer. I've heard this before. You know, most people have heard that one of the keys to longevity is calorie restriction, food restriction. And the next thought you have is, I'd rather die than to be in all that pain from hunger, right? I mean, why live a long, miserable life, you're thinking? Well, it doesn't have to be that way. And let me show you how you restrict calorie intake effortlessly. It was an experiment done by Listener, and he published it in 1987. What he did is he took a group of people and he controlled completely their diet. Put them in a setting where they ate all the meals with his research group. And they made muffins and soups and stews. And what they did is, in one phase of the experiment, is they put a lot of oil in these particular foods, disguised them so that people couldn't even see the oil. They couldn't really taste the difference. And as a result of putting this extra oil in the food, they increased the fat content of the total diet, and as a result, they increased the total number of calories that people consumed. Now remember, these people were just asked to eat as much as they wanted. There was no restriction on the amount of food that they ate. The food was presented to them, and they ate it. And because of the high oil content, the fat intake in this particular phase was 45 to 50%, and spontaneously, without a thought, without any consideration, their calorie intake was on the average around 2,800 calories a day. So what Listener's researchers did next is they took and they reduced the fat intake in the diet, and they reduced it down to around 30 to 35%, and they asked the subjects to eat as much as they want. And as a consequence, they consumed, on that lower medium fat diet, they consumed around 2,400 calories a day. And then what they did next is they reduced the fat intake in the diet. Again, they couldn't tell, the subject couldn't tell the difference in the foods. It all basically tastes the same, looked the same. They decreased the fat intake to around 15 to 20%, told them to eat as much as they wanted, and they increased their average calorie consumption to around 2,000, 2,100 calories a day. So without any thought, any effort, any knowledge, just by changing the components of the food, they dropped the calorie consumption by 700 to 800 calories per day. So you don't have to be hungry. You don't have to suffer to restrict the calorie consumption. In fact, in our diet, what we find is that without ever being hungry, we set up the food, as you well know, as buffet style. There are no policemen out there telling you can only have this amount of food. You'd revolt. I know you would. The pain of hunger is just too much to take, but just by changing the components of the food, we decrease the calorie intake by 20 to 40% compared to the average American diet. Now remember, I told you in animal experiments, if you decrease the calorie intake by 30 to 60%, you increase longevity by 50%. So without any suffering, without ever being hungry, spontaneously, just by changing the components of your diet, just by changing how the food's put together, you fall into that category of calorie restriction that has shown increased longevity in every animal experiment done. So you decrease calorie intake by about 20 to 40%. You decrease fat intake from around 50% to around 7%, and protein intake goes down from 20% to 12%. Now, in further animal experiments, I'll have to tell you, when they try and sort out what is the most important thing as far as changing the diet, they do find calorie reduction is important. No question about it. But they find also, almost as important, is cutting the fat, cutting the protein down, and increasing the carbohydrate to get this increased longevity. So it's not just the number of calories, it's the kind of calories that you eat that really make a difference. Insulin-like growth factor 1. It's a hormone in the body that looks like insulin, that's a little bit different than insulin, that stimulates growth. And I want to repeat again, you don't want to stimulate growth. You don't want to grow faster, which means growing older quicker. Animal experiments where they do a genetic manipulation of animals, in this case mice, where they cause an animal to be produced that does not produce much insulin-like growth factor 1, what they find in these experiments is these animals live about 40% longer, just by varying this single hormone in the body. And they report that these animals, they look younger, they resist disease, they have good eyes, joints, brains, and immunity. But you know this. You know that growth shortens longevity. You know this because of your pets at home. If you have a little dog, like a terrier, that little dog lives a long time, doesn't he or she? You know, they may live 12, 13, 14, sometimes longer years, more years than that. But a big dog, like I have a big dog, I have a Rottweiler, I'll be lucky if I get 9, 10, 11 years out of that dog's life. And if you measure the insulin-like growth factor 1 levels in these two different sizes of dogs, what you find is they're proportionally different. So we see that in the animal kingdom just in our everyday lives. And we also know this in people. There have been multiple studies that show that big people, and I don't mean fat people, I mean tall people. And how tall you are is a reflection of your nutrition, particularly your nutrition in your adolescence. Tall people have more breast cancer, more colon cancer, they live shorter lifespans. So being bigger is not necessarily better. Now, this particular picture makes the point, but maybe this picture makes it better. And that is that big people have more breast cancer, a shorter, more sickly life. The insulin-like growth factor 1 levels of people have been studied. This is a vegan that I know, and she has tattooed appropriately on her arm, vegan. She's very proud of the fact. But like many vegans, she and the people that were in this study eat too much oil. And they eat too many soy products, as far as I'm concerned, to be a healthy diet. In this particular research paper, what they did is they looked at women, and they measured their insulin-like growth factor 1 levels in their blood. And they looked at 3 different groups of women. They looked at vegans. Now, in Britain, vegans eat a lot of oil, and they eat a lot of soy products. And they compared those to lacto-ovo-vegetarians and also to meat eaters. And what they found is the IGF-1 activity was 13% lower in the 92 women who followed a vegan diet compared to the 99 meat eaters and the 101 lacto-ovo-vegetarians. So this can be demonstrated in people that you can change your insulin-like growth factor 1 levels. They've also demonstrated in men, they find men who follow a vegan diet have a 9% lower level of IGF-1. Now, how do you raise IGF-1 levels? Milk raises IGF-1 levels. Milk is a growth stimulant. It grows animals from infancy into adulthood. That's the purpose of milk. In studies done by the dairy industry, we found that feeding milk to women, adolescent women as well as postmenopausal women, increases the IGF-1 levels by about 10%. And the other important thing to notice is that isolated soy proteins also raise insulin-like growth factor 1 levels. Now, milk, I told you, is a very strong stimulant for growth, as it should be. That's its purpose. But if you compare the same amount of isolated milk protein with isolated soy protein, now we're not talking about tofu or soy milk or a little miso. What we're talking about instead is we're talking about a synthetic product, something that's isolated from the soybean. They grind up the soybean, they wash it with alcohol, they wash it with acid, they wash it with water, and as a consequence, they end up with just crystalline isolated soy protein. And then they take and they synthesize foods like burgers and hot dogs and sausages out of it, and as a result, you have something that is at best a drug, and at worst, a toxin to your system. And one of the things that this isolated soy protein does, it increases your insulin-like growth factor 1 levels even more so than dairy protein does. In an experiment done, what they find is the insulin-like growth factor 1 levels were twice as elevated when you fed subjects 40 grams of isolated soy protein compared to 40 grams of isolated milk protein. So, just to summarize, if you want to lower this growth stimulant, insulin-like growth factor 1, you do simple things with your diet. You get the isolated soy protein out, you get the dairy out, you get the meat, the poultry, the fish, and the shellfish, because all of these have been demonstrated in people to raise their insulin-like growth factor 1 levels. The other thing you do is you increase the antioxidants in your diet, and the antioxidants, not surprisingly, come from plant foods. Antioxidants, what they do is they prevent damage to cells. Many of the things that we do and many of the things that we eat cause the body to develop powerful free radicals, that we call them. And these are molecules that have extra electrons on them, and as a consequence, these electrons are donated to your tissues. And in the process, they damage your tissues. So you don't want these free radicals throughout your body. And the free radical scavengers, the antioxidants, they come from plant foods. Various vitamins like A, B6, C, beta-carotene, folic acid. These are very powerful antioxidants, and I must stress you want to get these antioxidants in their natural packages. Don't buy them in pills. Pills contain concentrated, isolated nutrients that cause serious imbalances in your body. They can increase your risk of cancer and heart disease and death by 25 to 35%. You need to take these antioxidants, vitamins, phytochemicals in their natural packages, the starches, fruits, and vegetables, because that's the way they'll deliver good health to you without adverse effects. Now, I want to tell you about a theory, and you're going to like this theory. It's called the theory of hormesis. I really latched onto it when I heard about it. The theory of hormesis says there's some benefit to being a little bad. Yeah, that's what it says. It says, exposure to mild stress for brief periods may challenge the body to adapt to better maintain and repair itself, which prolongs life. In other words, if you give the body a little bit of poison, then the systems that detoxify, they stay right up there in activity, and so when other poisons come in, they're very powerful, and they can detoxify these other substances that could harm you. For example, they say maybe that's why a little bit of wine every day helps. A little bit of alcohol reduces the risk of dying of heart disease, because it keeps the enzymes in the liver and the rest of the body that detoxify alcohol, keeps them very active and in large amounts, so that when other toxins come in, the body can detoxify those other toxins very efficiently. Or they say maybe because of exercise. That's why people live longer, because when you exercise, again, you stress the body. And you keep it at its peak level so that it can defend itself from other toxic substances. But let me tell you the problem with this theory for me. It may not be for you, but let me tell you what it is for me. It says exposure to mild stresses for brief periods of time. That's not me. No, I do everything to excess. I'm a type AAA personality. And so I don't know anything about doing anything a little bit. But let me introduce you to one of my relatives. This is old Mom. She was my great-grandmother. And she lived to be 106. As a matter of fact, she died on the day my youngest son was born. My youngest son now is a second-year medical student. And the last thing that she heard was Johnny had a baby boy, and they're going to name this boy, after your husband. And then she died at 106. Well, we lived very close to her, and I got to know her very well. And she was a woman that was quite outspoken, had lots of opinions, and freely expressed them. When we were young kids, my sister and I, we'd go over to her house and we'd eat, and she would say to us commonly, she'd say, "You guys eat too much meat, it'll make you sick." And when I got older, and she got older, say when she was about 103 years old, I gave up that meat. I became a pretty strict vegetarian. Not entirely strict. I'm not 100% vegetarian, but I certainly was eating a really, really good diet at that time. And I remember one afternoon we were sitting together talking, and she said to me, "Johnny, I want you to go get me a hamburger." And I knew what hamburger she wanted. She wanted a hamburger that was about this big, had a wafer-thin patty of beef on it, a little ketchup, a couple of pickles, and an airy white bun. And I brought this 25-cent hamburger back to her, and I gave it to her, and she unwrapped it, and she took her knife, and she cut it into quarters. She picked up a quarter, she shook it in my face, and she said, "You know, if you eat a little more meat, you'd be healthier." And then she proceeded to eat 2 quarters and put the rest away for later. That's not me. When I went to that same restaurant, I ordered 2 double pounders and a shake to wash it down. And if I was still hungry, I ordered another one. You see, I'm not a moderate person. I do everything with enthusiasm. And as a consequence, what I've had to do is I've had to change my focus of attention. I've had to find out what is good for me and be enthused about those things, like good food and exercise and clean habits, because I can't change my personality. I will always be an excited person. I will always be somebody who wants to get the most out of life. But I've had to learn I was killing myself by my direction towards harmful foods and other things. You may be the same way. I don't think you can change your personality. I really don't believe it. Now, who would want to? I mean, enthusiastic people are fun. But since you can't change that personality that you have, don't let it destroy you. Now, old Mom, she didn't have an ideal life. She was pretty healthy because she was moderate. She still ate a lot of rich foods, just small amounts. And she had some problems when she got to be about 90. She fractured her hips, and she lost her teeth, and she lost her hearing. And she would tell me often, she'd say, "You know, it's not worth it after 90. And I'd go over to her house, and she'd say to me things like, "I don't know why God didn't take me today. I don't know why I'm still here." But she sewed clothes until she was 106 years old. She had quite a bit of function and complete mental function. But she could have done better if she ate a healthier diet. Let me introduce you to other of my relatives. These are Mary's parents. Many of you know them. Wonderful people. Mary and I have been married 34 years. And when we first met, her mom and dad were about 40 pounds overweight, eating the American diet, and didn't really understand the issues of good health. When we first met, they asked me to start doing their physical examinations. And so I would do Dad's physical examination every year. And the first exam I did, I checked Dad's prostate, and I found a lump. And I sat them down, and I said, "You know, Dad has prostate cancer. And I don't want you to do anything about it. I just want you to just forget it. I'll check it every year. The treatments are terrible, and I don't think you should do anything about it, except, of course, change your diet." And they had faith in me, and besides that, they're people of great religious faith. Time went on, and we kept encouraging them to change their diet. They come and visit us in Hawaii, and I remember every time Dad would come to visit us in Hawaii, he'd say, "You got to take me to the hospital and x-ray my bowels. I know there's something serious wrong." And so I'd take him to the hospital. We'd do an upper and lower GI, and they'd be, of course, negative. And then 5-6 days after staying with us, he'd say, "You know, the bowel pains and cramps, they're all gone." And I'd say, "Well, do you think maybe that's because you're eating differently?" And I think they made the connection, but they didn't really want to hear that. And then about 25 years ago, when he was about 70 years old, an elephant sat on his chest. And I flew to Grand Rapids and stopped the bypass surgeons from operating on him after his heart attack. He lost the whole front of his heart. That was the defining moment. That's when he and his wife decided, my mother-in-law decided, it was time to do something different. And they changed their diet at that point. It was an overwhelming change in their physical health. They continue to be fully functional. The picture you see here is a picture of them at 91 years old on a trip to Alaska, and they are in the kayaks with Mary and I, going out to kayak around the ice floes. And both of them are manning the paddles and pulling their share at 91 years of age. This is a picture of him at 92 years of age out in front of my house. He's building a door at 92 years old, and I'm loading up my windsurfers in the truck. And I looked over to him and I said, "Would you like to go windsurfing?" He said, "I can't swim." I said, "Well, if you could swim, would you go?" He said, "Why not?" About this age, he started to have some problems with his urination. And I took him to the urologist, and the urologist examined him, and he came out of the office very sad-faced. He said, "I have a terrible thing to tell you." He said, your father-in-law has prostate cancer." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I discovered it 30 years ago." He said, "You didn't do anything about it?" I said, "Of course not." He said, "Good choice." Because he knows what I know about the treatment of that disease. But what he didn't know about is the powerful effect that a good diet has on cancer. These are successful people, fully functional. These people changed their diet. They were very sick up until their 70s, and they decided they want more life and a good quality life, and they were able to achieve that simply through a dietary and lifestyle change. Well, the end is coming, folks. I promise you, the end is coming. But life is great. At least for me, life is great. I've seen many patients over the years, and when things get difficult, for example, when people have a heart attack or go through bypass surgery or breast cancer surgery or something terrible, they'll often say to me, "I'd do anything not to be in this situation again. I'd do anything." And sometimes they say something like, "I'd eat cardboard not to be lying in this hospital bed." I'd eat cardboard. Okay, you'd eat cardboard. And I've asked myself that question, what would I eat cardboard for? Seriously, if somebody said, "If you eat this plate full of cardboard, I will give you some things. I will give you some opportunities." That magic genie comes up and says, "Eat this plate of cardboard." And I've kind of played this mental game with myself, and I want you to do it with yourself too. What would you eat a plate of cardboard for? Well, I want to tell you, I would eat a plate of cardboard to spend another hour playing with my grandson. I would eat a plate of cardboard to spend another hour playing with my grandson. I would eat a plate of cardboard to spend another afternoon like I did last April on the North Shore of Hawaii with my two boys windsurfing. You see on the far left, the one behind, that's Heather's husband. And you see the person on the windsurfer on your far right, that's my oldest son, who's a PhD in chemistry. And look who's out front. That's me. I would eat a plate of cardboard to have another afternoon like that. I don't exaggerate, I would. Or, I'd eat another plate of cardboard. I'd eat a plate of cardboard to spend another quiet evening of conversation with Mary. What would you eat a plate of cardboard for? I'm sure you can think of similar important things in your life. Family members, hobbies, things that you've done that are really enjoyable. If the time came and you were offered the bargain, there are many things you need a plate of cardboard for, but you don't have to do that. What you have to do is eat a bowl of oatmeal or a vegetable curry dish or a plate of pasta and go for a walk. That's all you have to do, and you'll get that hour, that afternoon, that day, that week, that month, that extra life. This is the most powerful medicine there is when it comes to longevity, when it comes to good health. And I'm not talking about just living long in a nursing home or a wheelchair. I'm talking about functional life. That's what you want. Those are the keys to good health. They're entirely in your hand. They're cost-free. It's just a change. That's all it is. It's just a matter of learning what the truth is in terms of good nutrition, in terms of good lifestyle. Lifestyle medicine is the most powerful thing there is. And once you learn it, nobody can take it away from you. It's yours for life. It's essentially the best and free medicine. And I encourage you all to take advantage of it. Work hard every day. It's not something easy to attain. As I told you before, is the learning curve is steep. But there's nothing else that works. And you might as well come to accept the fact that this is what you have to do, and every day put effort into making your life better. Now, many of you have known me for years. Some of you have known me for almost 30 years. And one of the things that you can say about me is this, is, John, every time I see you, you're trimmer, stronger looking, and handsomer. Okay? And there's a reason for that, and that's because every time you see me, I've taken better care of myself than I did the last time. This is a transition. This is something that we're all working for. The thing is that, you know, I'm pretty far along in that transition, and I enjoy some excellent health. I'm not perfect. But many of you are at the point where my colleagues are about to get you, or worse, or worse. And so you really need to hurry up that transition so that you get to a point where you can have that long and functional life. Because it's there for you, no matter what you've done in the past. You can improve, without doubt, the quality of your life, and I believe, in every case, the quantity of your life. Thank you very much.